Hello.
Our story begins in 23 BBY on the planet of Coruscant. Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker were currently training inside of one of the many training rooms inside of the Jedi Temple. The two of them were moving their lightsabers around. This duel was another example of Skywalker's inability to hold on to his patience, and he was being far too aggressive. As the two of them continued their little spar, Anakin's overconfidence got the best of him, where he demanded that Obi-Wan admit that he was beaten. Obi-Wan, of course, didn't yield. There were alternatives to fighting, and there was always a way out of an unfavorable situation. Obi-Wan spun his way away from Anakin and was able to pull the lightsaber away from his pupil. In one swift and decisive move, he was able to disarm Anakin and leave him defeated in the spar. Obi-Wan deignited the lightsabers and handed Anakin his own. He told Anakin that he was a powerful warrior. However, he wouldn't be able to progress further in his Jedi career if he continued to neglect patience. Anakin nodded his head as his master smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Obi-Wan started out of the room, and Anakin followed him. As they exited the room, they were intercepted by Jedi Master Ki-Adi-Mundi. He happened to actually be looking for them, but Mundi told Master Kenobi that there were messages waiting for him in the briefing room. Obi-Wan nodded his head, and the two of them made their way there. Part of Anakin was eager and excited. This could be a chance to get off of Coruscant and chase a new adventure, or find some action, or be a hero. Those words had all some sense of an allure for Anakin. He could get them if he went somewhere exciting. His hopes dwindled when they entered the communication room. Skywalker saw Yoda standing in front of the communication device. On the table, or more or less inside of the hologram, was a very prideful woman wearing elegant robes. Anakin just about rolled his eyes. What fun! Another political debate, or political advocacy. Something boring. Who cares? Where's the action? Anakin followed his master in, but there was an odd hesitation coming from Kenobi. As Obi-Wan entered the room, his eyes drifted from Yoda, whose attention was focused on the hologram, upwards. When Obi-Wan moved his eyes up, his heart stopped, and he forgot to breathe. She was remarkable, just as the day she was when he last saw her, or the times she'd shown herself in dreams, daydreams, or just random thoughts throughout the day. Obi-Wan almost missed the next step down the stairs. He was so caught off guard. He had to play it cool though. It had been so many years since they last saw each other. Surely she had moved on, married. He couldn't lie, you know. She wasn't dating and she wasn't in a marriage. It would make news. Mandalore was quite the influential planet after their civil war nearly 2 decades before. The two Jedi got down to the floor next to Yoda, who turned over and told them that Duchess Satine Amidala was in need of Jedi investigation. She informed them that there was a group of Mandalorians who were still being loyal to the old Mandalorian way. The same people who almost caused a mass extinction on their planet nearly 20 years before. The majority of Mandalorians agreed with Clan Kryze that it was time to move on, follow the pursuit of peace and freedom, though it was stripped away by these lunatics, and while Satine didn't really want to ask for help, she would not go to the Republic. Palpatine in the Senate had been breathing down her neck since she was just a girl. It wasn't easy being a child ruler. But she had to stand her ground against the likes of Chancellor Valorum, who offered no aid, and Chancellor Palpatine, who was even more prescient in taking control over Mandalore. Satine didn't want anyone to know about this, and aside from Yoda, Mundi, and these two Jedi, it was not to go on any sort of public record. It was a basic investigation, with no political biases. Technically, the Jedi couldn't do that. But as long as there were no attacks on the people of Mandalore or deaths of public figures, then it could be a secured mission with no need to inform the Republic. This isn't something that Yoda was really all that interested in doing, but because Kenobi was the only surviving Jedi to have been on Mandalore all that recently, he figured he'd ask Obi-Wan if he had any interest in doing so. It really was an up-in-the-air thing for Satine. There was no guarantee that Obi-Wan would do it, but she hoped and trusted that he would. Obi-Wan, without even a second of hesitation, agreed to do it. He said he would be at Mandalore as soon as possible. There was a glimmer of romance in Satine's eyes, but her face showed relief more than anything else that she could verbally say. The hologram ended, and Obi-Wan got his last look at Satine before she vanished. He turned to Master Yoda and informed him that they would be controlling the situation to ensure there would be no need for the public to interject. Yoda expressed that he didn't like the idea of keeping anything from the Senate, but if it could be done quietly without disrupting the several peace treaties between Mandalore and the Republic, then it wouldn't be a big deal. Obi-Wan ensured it wouldn't be, before turning back to Anakin and seeing a slight disappointment on his face, but ignoring it until they got to their vessel so they could talk about it privately. Both Jedi bowed to the Grand Master and left the communication room for the Jedi Temple hangar bay. When they entered the ship, after getting everything prepared, Obi-Wan asked Anakin what the face he made was for. Skywalker kind of shrugged it off, suggesting that he was hoping there would be a little bit more excitement. Obi-Wan reminded Anakin that Jedi aren't meant to chase excitement. However, he told his student that while it might seem like another diplomatic mission, not everything is as it seems. Anakin shrugged his shoulders and nestled down into the co-pilot seat. There would be another few conversations from Coruscant to Mandalore, but none of them about Obi-Wan's little stall inside the communication room, or how Anakin thought this would be a boring mission, regardless of it being not what it seemed, apparently. Obi-Wan didn't really disclose how the Mandalorians were warriors, but that wasn't because he was trying to not get Anakin's hopes up. He just assumed Anakin was paying attention during that history lesson. Obviously Anakin hadn't, or he might have been a little bit more excited. Though truthfully, he wasn't paying much attention to what Satine or Obi-Wan was saying inside the mission room to begin with. He was thinking about other things. For Anakin, he still had this slight fantasy that he could be with the former Queen of Naboo, but that would likely never happen. As their ship entered the Mandalore system, Obi-Wan piloted a ship down to the capital of Sundari. This initially confused Anakin. He asked why they weren't going to Kaldabi. Obi-Wan slowly turned his head, asking what he meant. Anakin thought he could finally correct Obi-Wan for once, and said with a confident tone that Kaldabi was the capital of Mandalore, not Sundari, so why were they going to the lesser populated Sundari? Obi-Wan almost lost his temper. Truthfully, at this point, who could blame him? Anakin had learned a thing, and even more so, it was kind of a thing that was really big in Obi-Wan's life. Like, how could Anakin not know? Before the ship landed, Obi-Wan gave a brief, really brief rundown of what happened in the last 20 years. Mandalore was run by Clan Kryze, Satine's father, who was killed by the old way thinking Mandalorians. A war broke out, and Satine, as a teenager, had to be removed from Kaldabe because the entire city and its population were killed during the war. The new Mandalorians triumphed and renounced warfare, because they saw how it had destroyed them in their past and almost destroyed them in their present. The landing gears hit the ground and Anakin realized that for the duration of this mission, he should just stay quiet. Typically, he needed to be instructed to stay quiet. With the lack of knowledge on Mandalore, he realized he needed not to say anything. How odd for him to remember Kaldabi but not Sundari, or the entire war that happened during that time 20 years ago? Kind of funny, but the two Jedi had to go. They got up and walked down the ramp of their vessel, and were escorted to the palace of Sundari. Upon their arrival, they would meet the ever-radiant Duchess Satine. She surrendered her hand to Obi-Wan, who took it in an ever-so-fashionable sense. Anakin could feel something. He wasn't sure what it was, but there was something going on here, and he could feel it. Maybe it was an old flame. He wasn't really positive, but there had to be feelings involved. There was a slight awkwardness when Obi-Wan and Satine started talking, but after a few quips at each other, the two of them spoke to each other like they'd spent a lifetime curating a twist of wit, sass, love, and joy between each and every moment. Each sentence was filled with elegance and a flirtatious grin. It was a classic romance, and Anakin wasn't sure if what he was seeing was realistic or just his imagination. Obi-Wan was always so blank when it came to his emotions, and all of a sudden this? It's not like Obi-Wan didn't have people falling over themselves for him. Didn't matter who it was, didn't matter what team they played for. He was Obi-Wan Kenobi, after all. Nonetheless, Anakin never batted an eye to it. Anakin just thought he was robotic, but it seemed like he noticed and maybe even enjoyed the attention. But obviously Obi-Wan wanted something more than attention. Anyone could give attention, though not everyone can share life with you, and it seemed that was what was transpiring between the Duchess and the Jedi Master. Their walk continued, and Anakin kind of listened from behind as the two of them caught up. Anakin remembered pieces of things he forgot to pay attention to during class or with Obi-Wan. In all fairness, the paper pod racer he made during class was really cool, but if he paid more attention, then he would have picked up on their convo a lot faster. The conversation came clamoring to an end as the two of them departed into an elevator. They were then followed by Anakin and the Royal Guard. A state dinner was prepared by the Duchess for her Jedi guests before they began their true mission. Satine was enthralled to have Obi-Wan back with her, but she knew the reality of this mission was simply business, and is likely how it would be seen by Obi-Wan. That was far from the truth. The two Jedi were asked to seat themselves as the Duchess would be joining them momentarily. She had to handle a quick thing. It wasn't really that big of a deal, but Satine felt that no task was too small if it was for her people. Anakin and Obi-Wan sat at the table quietly for a moment. Anakin asked if there was something he was missing. He hadn't realized it, but Obi-Wan was completely zoned out when he asked him the question. Obi-Wan snapped back and told Anakin that there was nothing to miss. It was just, before he could actually finish and culminate the perfect answer, Satine walked in and looked as elegant as ever. After a couple more pleasantries, everything was seemingly going well. Satine explained more of what she needed help with, and expressed that she didn't think it would be a difficult task for them to handle, but she would be prepared to send aid if they needed it. Just because she was a pacifist didn't mean her Royal Guard wasn't trained. She did have people who knew how to fight, it just wasn't the most common thing for the people in Sundari to do, especially in this new era of Mandalore. Their wonderful dinner was interrupted by a massive explosion. The table lifted off of the ground in a fiery ray of plasma and heat. Kenobi leapt up instinctively in front of Satine. Anakin was too far away from him, and he knew it. The blast was massive, and it nearly killed both Obi-Wan and Satine, the intended targets. Had it not been for the positioning and the poor placement of the bomb, it likely would have killed the two of them. The irony is, Satine typically sat on the other side of the table, where the bomb was. She just chose this side, where they were, because it had a better view of the city. The other side was a bit more quiet, and because she usually ate alone, it was better for her to eat there typically. Anakin wasn't hurt at all. There was actually a bit of char on his robes, but for the most part he was alright, just thrown out of the room. When the wreckage was pillaged by the bombers, they found the Jedi Master lying on top of the Duchess, both of them clearly in some sort of critical condition. They were extracted and taken back to their camp. Skywalker was able to catch a glimpse of the blue armor before they vanished, as he quickly looked for help. The Mandalorian guards were either killed or badly injured by the blast. He didn't have any of the frequencies, so he grabbed one of their comms and asked for assistance, but it was already on the way. Turns out there was a firefight in the streets. Nothing too tense, just a standoff between the Night Owls and the Royal Guard, though it seemed as if it was just a distraction for the extraction of the Duchess. The intention they had was to either kill her or execute her, if she didn't die in the blast, of course. With the added bonus, they now had a Jedi to kill. They'd bring them back to camp. Skywalker, hearing the commotion, would run out to see the guards killing off a couple of the old Mandalorians before the rest of them vanished through the skies. Anakin told them that they had to chase them down. The commander of the Royal Guard told the Jedi Master that he needed to relax. They had to secure the city to ensure everything wasn't lost. The commander did want to save Satine, but she would have wanted to make sure Sundari was locked down before going after her. Those were her actual orders. She gave them because she knew her life was always at risk, which was another reason why she usually ate alone. It was a hard life for her. Because the commander was dragging his feet on this, Anakin realized that if he wanted to find and save Obi-Wan and the Duchess, he needed to go and get them himself. He asked the commander of where the other Mandalorians could have gone. He told Skywalker that they were banished to the moon of Concordia. Chances are he'd be able to find something out there, but for Anakin, they suggested he wait until they could afford to send any guards over to the moon to assist them. That didn't sit right with Anakin, so he disobeyed and shot off to the moon. When he arrived, he didn't even know where to look. Of course, the worst part is, he was flying around in a Jedi shuttle, but he did have Grandmaster Yoda on the communication device. He informed Yoda of what had happened, and what he was trying to do. This actually wasn't Anakin calling Yoda, it was Yoda checking in on the mission. Perfect timing, it seems. Yoda informed Anakin that he should be very careful when dealing with Mandalorians. They didn't have a history of liking Jedi, and the ship would be seen as a threat to them. He told them that Master Windu would be on Mandalore in the coming hours to assist them with keeping everything under wraps from the Republic. When the communication ended, Yoda expressed his unhappiness with allowing the situation to persist any further. Of course, the Jedi could act as a separate entity from the Republic, but since the era of the High Republic and the Starlight Beacon projects, Yoda had become very stuck to the Republic itself. Windu was being sent to handle the damage control to ensure the Duchess was secured and everything could be left for her to handle once she made a full recovery. As Anakin was flying over the moon's surface, his ship was shot out of the sky and it slammed down onto the surface. Anakin was uninjured, but he was very pissed. When he came out of the vessel, he saw a number of Mandalorians wearing blue armor, and with the ignition of his lightsaber, he challenged each and every single one of them. There were about 4 of them with their rocket packs, and they were able to shoot down the Jedi shuttle. Anakin got to work quickly, using his blade and using his training to take the Mandalorians out one by one. It wasn't easy, especially with their Beskar armor, which again, thanks to Anakin not paying attention in class, he wasn't privy to this information. Though it didn't matter because he was able to defeat the few Mandalorians who confronted him. This left Skywalker in a stranded location on a world he'd never been to before. He had to find this Mandalorian camp so he could free Kenobi and Satine. He wandered for what felt like hours until he heard a commotion. It sounded like a bunch of people cheering or something. Anakin ran up and looked down over the camp, the Mandalorians. They were all cheering and he saw a couple of grunts throw the Duchess to the ground. She was very clearly injured from the blast, and so was Obi-Wan, who was thrown down next to her. Anakin almost leapt into action, but someone put their hand over his mouth and grabbed his attention. He almost let out a scream, but he heard a soft, almost melancholic voice. Anakin turned around and saw a woman, close in age to Satine, but wearing Mandalorian armor. The similarities were so present, and Anakin could see the relation immediately. He placed his hand on his weapon, and the woman told him not to do it. Bo told Anakin that while she was against Satine's rule, she would not condone outright killing her. Bo had no reason to believe it, but if Satine died, it would rip the fabric of Mandalore apart, leaving the crumble to ruins. Truthfully, Bo still loved her sister, and while they hadn't spoken in years, she didn't want to see Satine publicly executed. It kind of changed her mindset seeing her in this predicament. Anakin asked Bo what the plan was, and she said she could kill Pre Vizsla, but the chances are it could kill Satine and the Jedi. Anakin looked back over his shoulder and asked what kind of weapon she she was carrying. Bo showed him that she had the pistols, and she also had a rocket on her back. Anakin told her that he had the Force. In his mind, this was a fly thing to say, but it didn't really do much for Bo. He elaborated, after trying to sound like a cool cat. He told her that he could protect Obi-Wan and Satine from this distance, but the chances are they'd be attacked after the ringleader was killed. Bo sighed. She said she knew these people. They would turn on each other before anything else. Bo also knew another thing. By killing Vizsla, the Darksaber would fall to her, which would do well for her popularity, hopefully. The two of them watched Vizsla emerge with the Darksaber in his hand. He wasn't wearing his helmet and he was showing off in front of his people, getting them all riled up. They asked who they should kill first, the Jedi or the Duchess. The answers are split. They wanted to kill both. The age-old rivalry of the Jedi, or the person who trapped them on Concordia and the Duchess. They wanted to kill the Duchess first, and then they could symbolically kill the Jedi Master. Obi-Wan could hardly even stay upright while being on his knees. Satine was trying to get his attention to see if he was alright, until she was hit. Bo told Anakin to be ready. He grinned at her and reached his hands out. Vizsla pulled his hand above his head, and with the blade ready to strike true. Bo launched her rocket, and Anakin used the Force to protect Satine and Obi-Wan. The sounds of the rocket wasn't heard until Vizsla's face was met with the fires of 1,000 suns. He was blown to pieces, and the Mandalorians all lost their minds. Like a hive of bees without a queen, they began to go rabid on each other. What made it even more confusing was the fact that the Duchess and the Jedi survived, which made them have this godly aura. It made the Mandalorians feel all the more barbaric, because they saw these two individuals as the chosen ones. How could they survive that blast? Bo and Anakin didn't get this far, but a couple of royalists launched their jetpacks up and flew towards the two of them. Anakin looked at her and asked if she had his back, and she nodded. Skywalker ignited his lightsaber and she put her helmet on. The two of them got up and jumped down and began to fight against the other Mandalorians. They stood back to back with each other. With the best car on her armor, she would be just as much of a protection for him as he was for her. They both held their own, and they kept quiet, almost communicating without having to say a word. The good thing about the disturbed nest of Hornets they had here is that not a single one of them focused on the Duchess of the Jedi. They simply didn't exist in their minds, which only made the situation even more ironic. Their issue wasn't their legacy rival nor the Duchess, it was always each other, something the Duchess tried to stop them from engaging in. The closer they got to the two captives, the more intense the battle got. Anakin asked Bo if she had a vessel, and she nodded her head. The moment they got to the two of them, Anakin picked Obi-Wan up and slung him over his shoulders. Satine was alright enough to walk, and with the cover of Bo-Katan and the Night Owls, they were able to escape to Bo's Cormac fighter and escape the planet. Bo ordered the Night Owls to escape into the caves and destroy the munition supplies that the Death Watch had been curating. See, the Clone Wars were a year away from starting, and because they were, Dooku was feeding supplies to Vizsla with the hope of taking control over Mandalore. The planet had a lot of influence, and with Satine's neutrality in the Republic established, there was no chance she would join the war on behalf of the Separatists or the Republic. Her leadership would rally systems to join her cause. Dooku predicted about 400 systems to join her. In reality, it would have been likely much more. The Night Owls escaped, and as they did, the war between Mandalorians continued. Gar Saxon tried to seize control over the situation, but it wasn't going as favorably as one might think it would. Even with the Night Owls, Satine and Bo-Katan not there, they continued their fight with each other. Bo was able to get to the ship and get it off-world and fly towards Kryze Castle on Kalevala. It was a mostly unpopulated world, so it would be safe from the other Mandalorians. Bo assumed that they would try and track them to Sundari, so it'd be best to get them to Kalevala, especially considering Sundari was under heavy lockdown and they probably wouldn't want to see a Cormac fighter coming towards them. By the time they got to Kalevala, Mace Windu, who couldn't get in contact with Skywalker Kenobi, was entering Concordia with an assortment of guards from Sundari. He would find the wreckage of the Jedi ship and begin his investigation to find the two Jedi and the Duchess. On Kalevala, Obi-Wan was thrown into a bacta tank, while Satine was patched up by a medical droid. It had been the family doctor for eons, and it was just turned on and got back to work. Anakin waited outside of the medical facility as Bo apologized to Satine for everything that happened between the two of them. There was some obvious adversity between the two sisters, but it could be managed. Bo learned that talking it out would be better than just joining a group of active terrorists. After a little bit of reconciliation, Bo left the medical room and joined Anakin on the landing platform. He was looking over the massive mountains and the seas right below them. Bo thanked Anakin for his help and asked for his name, considering they actually never shared names with each other. The two of them would sit outside on the landing platform with their legs hanging off of it and talk for hours. Satine was sleeping in the medical room on a small cot that she pulled out and placed next to Obi-Wan's bacta tank. The medical droid was watching over it with great care. Bo and Anakin realized they had a lot in common. Their conversations weren't forced, and they came across really naturally. Bo wasn't really receptive to any flirts that Anakin made, but that wasn't really a big deal because the nature of their conversation was really peaceful. They were able to learn a lot about each other during this conversation. Both of them were warriors, and both a little brash. They were the younger ones, Bo the younger sister and Anakin a Padawan. They could relate on certain levels with being treated as the younger ones. However, Bo was a princess. As they were talking, Anakin's communicator buzzed, but it wasn't steady. He'd accidentally crushed it during the battle. He pulled it out and tried to answer it, but nothing came through. Anakin stood up and pointed a communication device outwards, and he got through a short message from Master Windu, trying to see if he and Obi-Wan were alright. A lot of it was misconstrued, but it wasn't entirely put together. The last part of the message sounded like Sundari, but Anakin wasn't sure. He told Bo that he should go to Sundari to see if he could find the Jedi Master. She told him that she would go with him if he wanted, and with a nod of the head, she came along. The two of them knew that Obi-Wan and Satine would be fine for the time being, so they could go to Sundari without worrying about them being injured or hurt. When they arrived, the city was still under lockdown, which made Bo's outfit all the more unwelcome. Anakin explained to the commander the entire situation and how it was under control, as he asked if the Jedi Master was still around. The commander took Skywalker and Bo into the city and over to where Windu was. He wasn't far away from the landing yards, so it didn't take long. Windu was genuinely concerned for Skywalker and Kenobi, and when he saw Anakin, he was very relieved. Anakin would explain the entire situation to Windu and what had happened, which would have Mace realize that everything was still within their control. With Satine alive, there was a chance the Republic wouldn't get involved in the situation. For the most part, there wasn't really any news circulating out of the city or the planet. So aside from the Jedi and the Royal Guard, no one really knew, which Mace wanted to keep that way. Anakin wasn't exactly fond of this, but he didn't say anything about it. Mace told Anakin that since everything was under their control, he'd make his way back to Coruscant, telling him that if they needed anything, to let him know. With the situation seemingly under control, there was no reason to worry about a treaty breaking or a public distrust for the Jedi. If anything, the Mandalorian people continued their evolution, seeing the Jedi as allies. It was far from the de-evolution that beset the Mandalorians of the old way. Anakin and Bo prepared to make their way back to Kalevala when Bo expressed her peace with the Jedi. She had fallen for the indoctrination tactics that Pre Vizsla used on her and many others. She had seen the Jedi as villains, and while she gave Anakin the benefit of the doubt when they first met, she felt a lot more trust for him and the Jedi as a whole. Anakin was confused, but she explained why what the Jedi did was so important for Mandalore. Bo may have not agreed with her sister a ton, but she did agree that they wanted Mandalore to remain a sovereign planet, without the protection or oversight of the Republic. Bo admitted, a little ashamedly, that she wished she had seen how right Satine was before all this happened. She couldn't imagine what would happen if Satine had died on Sundari or on Concordia. It all made sense until she saw her sister in such a condition. The only thing that finalized Bo's push away from the former Brethren, or the Death Watch, was how quickly they turned on each other. They were all allies, and within moments, they were trying to kill each other. All after the stupid artifact. Bo lifted up the Darksaber. It meant that she could rule her people, but that rule belonged to Satine, no matter the wielder of the Darksaber. Anakin asked about it, and she told him all about the history of the Darksaber and how it got to where it was, including how Clan Kryze grew to power over the users of the Darksaber. Anakin asked Bo about her feelings now, and she admitted that she'd rather stay the warrior's path, but maybe something could be agreed with her sister. Bo admitted that while Satine was a pacifist at the heart, she'd been trained like any other Mandalorian before the Civil War. It was after their father's death when it seemed to change. The sisters stopped talking, and it's likely when Satine refused to follow any sort of warrior path, seeing what it could do to other people. The key relation between both of these individuals is neither followed politics or were political. Both Anakin and Bo were both brash and warrior types, which was a compliment to their strive to be the best at what they did. Upon their return to Kalevala, they'd walk into the castle to see Satine wandering around. It wasn't aimless, but almost sad. Her and Bo walked these halls when they were girls, when their parents were still alive, and they had been since emptied when their parents died. Bo put her hand on Anakin's arm and thanked him for his kindness. She walked away and went over to Satine and see if she was alright. While she did, Anakin made his way for Obi-Wan and checked in on him, finding him to be alright. He was recovering really well, which was positive. While Bo and Satine made up and talked, Anakin quietly sat outside of Obi-Wan's bacta tank. He was thinking about everything. Anakin had been obsessed with Padme for years, and now he couldn't even picture her. Their bond didn't have any chemistry, at least not like this. Bo was someone he could talk to with ease without freaking out about, which is really weird. She gave him a sense of comfort, and while it was nothing but a fever dream, there was something going on between Obi-Wan and Satine, so maybe it wasn't as far-fetched as he initially thought. Eventually, as the sun went down, Anakin got a little hungry, so he got up and walked around the corner looking for some food. There was food inside of Bo's ship, which was brought into the kitchen area. Satine was sleeping in her room, and Bo was standing silently in the kitchen. Anakin asked if she was alright, and she wiped her face and then turned around and told him she was. She asked if he wanted anything. Most of it was just rations from the Death Watch camp, but they were pretty good rations because she was a lieutenant. He nodded his head, and she grabbed something for the two of them, and asked where he'd like to sit. He suggested the landing platform. They went back out there and continued their conversation, picking up right where they left off. There wasn't a missed beat between the two of them. The vibes were immaculate, though the reality is, there was a fine line of communication and vulnerability without it feeling forced. Bo and Anakin were both a bit tough and hard to break through, but the fact that they were kind of both the same in that form made it easy for the two of them to talk to each other. Bo admitted that it was hard being around her sister again. The two of them had been separated for so long. Anakin expressed his understanding for this, and when she was finished, he told her about the relationship with his mother and how she was a slave on Tatooine, still. Bo leapt to her feet. There'd been many sleepless nights for her over the past 2 decades when she wished she could say something to her mother or father. Not that they had one final bad confrontation, just a last I love you or I miss you. She told Anakin that they were going to where his mother was to find her. He asked if that was alright with her, and she nearly dragged him to his feet. The two of them entered her ship and took off for Tatooine. Bo didn't want Anakin to have the same regret she did. Within a number of hours, they would arrive on Tatooine and make their way for Mos Espa. Upon their arrival, they would be the sight to see. A Mandalorian and a Jedi walking through the streets of one of the scummiest places in the galaxy. It was odd to say the least, but it was early morning hours, which meant that Watto would be at his shop. When the two of them arrived, Watto was confused, surprised, and then relieved. Anakin could deal with something for him. Bo had enough of this bickering between the two of them, so she ignited the darksaber and twisted it around and held it towards Watto's neck, demanding he tell Anakin where his mother was. This shocked Anakin, but not for nothing. It was kinda cool. Like, okay girl, go off. When Watto informed them, she deignited the weapon, and they made their way for the Junland Wastelands, to the Lars homestead. Outside the Lars homestead, Klieg and Shmi were outside doing whatever it is that moisture farmers do. The young Owen Lars was helping out his father and his stepmom. His girlfriend Beru was inside of the homestead. She had gone in to turn the power converters on. It seemed like they were trying a new defense system. The Tusken Raiders had been out in the area a lot lately, so they had to make sure they could deal with them. Of course, when the Mandalorian starfighter landed, they were all a bit taken aback, but when Anakin exited, Shmi was very excited. Bo walked out a little slower behind Anakin, without her helmet on. She lived momentarily a little vicariously through Anakin. Seeing his joy and his mother's joy at their reunion was heartwarming. She did wish she could experience it for herself, but seeing Anakin have it after what he explained was 9 long years without any contact or information on her was very heartwarming. It only contributed to the similarities between the two of them. Shmi was astonished at how big Anakin got, and what he was able to accomplish in such a short period of time. She stopped what she was doing and introduced Klieg to him, and they went into the homestead. Of course, Bo was introduced and invited in. Over the course of several hours in catching up, and for Bo learning a lot about Anakin, the notion of Tusken Raiders would come up. It would become very apparent that the Tusken Raiders had been out and about in their area lately. They were trying to defend themselves, but aside from a couple of cycler rifles, they didn't have much. Bo leapt up and suggested that they had a couple sentries inside of her starfighter, and she could set them up for the Lars. Klieg suggested that it was way too much, but Bo was rather adamant. There was no reason to risk their lives. Something about the Tuskens struck home with Bo, and she didn't want Anakin to lose his mother and stepfather. It was very unnecessary. Klieg, at least from Bo's understanding, could become Anakin's real father figure. Of course, there was a side effect of him being a Jedi, but you know, any little bit helps. Anakin couldn't verbally express his gratitude. The Mandalorian sentry would have more than enough firepower to keep the Raiders away, but it could also alert the family so they could protect themselves. Bo set it up on the far side of the homestead. As Klieg suggested, the Tuskens typically came from that side. Of course, it would be unlucky if they came from the other direction, but hopefully they wouldn't. After a day on Tatooine, Bo and Anakin would say their goodbyes and leave. There was some cheeky discourse between Anakin and Shmi about Bo. Not for nothing, Shmi rather liked Bo, because Bo wouldn't just put up with anything from anyone. Though, the one thing Shmi wasn't the most keen on was the age difference. Time would tell though. Maybe it would work out beautifully. On the return to Kelvala, Anakin would express his gratitude to Bo for what she did and how she was taking care of his family. She was very sincere, maybe not the most emotionally loving person, but she showed it through various other love languages, and gift-giving was at the top of that list. Giving something to Anakin like that wasn't something Bo typically did. They shared a brief moment of surreal beauty with each other. It wasn't anything deeper than eye contact, but when you see the stars in someone's eyes, why need anything more? When they returned, Anakin severely questioned his loyalties to the Jedi. But this magic wasn't something that would make him do something erratic. It was a controlled feeling, something that sat between the two of them. There wasn't an ounce of forcefulness, and it was really perfect because neither of them had ever been in a relationship. Bo was married to the warrior way, and Anakin was married to the Jedi way, kinda. And what he thought was meant to be Padme, maybe not. When they returned, they both would be shocked to say the very least. They would discover the Master and the Duchess dancing in the main hall. Bo put her hand over Anakin's mouth and forced him away from the entrance to ensure they didn't interrupt it. Truthfully, Bo was being nosy, and she wanted to see what her big sister was doing, and also what else happened. But also, truthfully, Anakin wanted to be nosy too. What was her sister doing with his master? They were both like little kids watching mom and dad have a special little moment. It was really quaint. And it made Anakin question if the Jedi were really meant for him. They obviously weren't meant for Kenobi. Maybe there was something to this, keeping it a secret, but in reality, both Satine and Obi-Wan knew that this moment wouldn't be long-lived, so they might as well make the best of it. During their dance, they were talking with each other, but for Bo and Anakin, it was nothing louder than a mumble, secrets only Satine and Obi-Wan could have with each other. Bo and Anakin decided to sneak off and let the two of them have their time together. It was clearly important to the two of them, so they might as well allow them to enjoy it. Bo and Anakin were exactly the dance in an elegant hall type of individuals. They're more so commit a war crime, escape, and laugh about it on the way out type. They left the castle and went on their own little adventure. The really cool thing about this dynamic is that initially it was entirely platonic, and then instantaneously became natural. There were definite feelings floating around between each other, but they didn't know if the other felt them, and they didn't want to ruin the connection they felt, so they kept it platonic until Anakin left. The last night with each other, they continued sharing stories, and they both expressed excitement to see each other again, whenever they could. On the trip back from Coruscant, Anakin and Obi-Wan talked, and Anakin for the first time initiated an opening up. Obi-Wan was on cloud 100, and he basically was floating. He was so happy and nothing could really change that. Mostly because, amongst other things, Satine told him. She expressed that she loved him, and she never wanted their time to end. Obi-Wan told Satine that he'd be back when the time was right. When Obi-Wan and Anakin got to talking, they both told each other what they were thinking and feeling towards each of the respective Kree sisters. Obi-Wan had a long ignited flame that burned brighter than a galactic core with Satine, while Anakin's new flame was full of potential. What should they do? Well, they'd have to live with it. Obi-Wan told Anakin his plans and suggested that if Anakin wanted, he could follow along with them. So, maybe he would. But of course, not everything went as planned. Within a year, Anakin and Obi-Wan were assigned Padme Amidala. Palpatine never actually learned about Anakin's stint on Mandalore, because about a day after they returned to Coruscant, they were sent off to deal with a political diversion in a far part of the galaxy, and then after that, they'd be sent to do a border dispute on Ancion. By the time they were assigned to protect Padme Amidala, Anakin had no real feelings for her. The last year or so were dedicated to Bo-Katan. Mandalore was completely shifted. Satine returned, and remaining members of the Death Watch were either hunted down and killed or imprisoned. It was a good deal for the new Mandalorians. Bo became leader of a new sect of the Mandalorian Royal Guard, which was built around the traditions without the practice of those heinous acts. It made the Royal Guard seem a little bit more elite, but nothing more than that, because the collective people, especially after Satine was almost killed, had a lot more disliking for the old ways. News came out about the attempt on Satine's life about a month after her recovery. Satine saved the people from extinction, and it would be unwise to move on from her. With her returning, essentially uninjured, society could continue without crumbling under pressure. Satine and Bo were back to being true sisters, and their relationship was able to flourish because of it. After everything calmed down, Satine and Bo brought the Darksaber to the Great Forge and melted it down. They turned it into a small monumental artifact that could go into a museum, so that their past could be remembered, but never repeated. From Coruscant to Naboo, Padme and Anakin would have a very, very natural bond. Anakin wasn't trying to make a move on her 24/7, and so there was no awkward flirting. There was some natural flirting, but it wasn't forced, and it wasn't weird or freaky. Anakin was very hands-off, and while there were elements of immaturity, there was no need for him to be interested in Padme. They didn't have any chemistry, like any. Because Anakin never went to Tatooine to save his mother, who was well protected by Bo's sentry, he was able to relay information from Naboo to Coruscant a lot quicker, which allowed the two of them to stay on Naboo without interfering. This had Windu and a collection of other Jedi getting to Geonosis before Obi-Wan was ever placed into the arena, which allowed for a secret breakout from Geonosis without a massive battle ensuing, partially because Obi-Wan had a more elongated conversation with Dooku while imprisoned. This led to the Republic's blockade in the Outer Rim being set up. The fleet was very unprepared, but without a massive battle ensuing, the galaxy became very standoffish. Because of Anakin's maturity in the situation and his ability to stay put, Obi-Wan and the Council decided he was worthy of becoming a Jedi Knight, though it wouldn't last too long. As the galaxy prepared to descend into war with the Separatist Council and Dooku preparing to break away from the Republic, Obi-Wan became a member of the Lost 21. Shortly after Obi-Wan left the Order, Anakin would follow suit. Anakin had teetered on the idea, even getting cold feet up until after Obi-Wan left, but he couldn't hold back anymore. Bo and Anakin had talked over communication devices for a good while since they last saw each other. Obi-Wan and Satine didn't have to hit each other up. They missed each other, but they knew the reward would overbear their longing for each other. Talking wouldn't suffice the desire to see each other in person. Plus, Satine was extra busy ensuring the old Mandalorians didn't rise up again. The Children of the Watch, for example, were actually given refuge on Concordia. Satine didn't have an issue with them existing because the Children of the Watch weren't inherently aggressive like Death Watch. They were still Mandalorians and warriors, but they weren't straight-up terrorists. So she let them have refuge over Pre Vizsla's former home and where the former Death Watch camp was. Obi-Wan arrived first. Shortly after he arrived, Anakin arrived. Not long after that, the Clone Wars started. With all the butterflies and excitement, Anakin made no mention of anything to Palpatine. It had been, after all, more than a year since they last talked to each other, so he kind of had an excuse for it. Upon their rekindling, Obi-Wan and Satine would admit that they had interest in tying the knot. If anything, in the last several years of their lives told them anything, then they were meant to be. They had nearly 2 decades at work, so of course it was natural for that to happen. Obi-Wan would become the Duke Consort of Mandalore, being that one could not marry into the actual royal family in Mandalorian society. The marriage would be massive, being that it happened right before the war began. It made headlines, especially because of Mandalore's prominence in the galactic realm. Anakin and Bo would jump straight into things. They would take it slow, as they had before, and allow the relationship to slowly develop. The Clone Wars would eventually begin, and it would take a toll on the galaxy. But with the Clone Army and the Jedi ready for war, the Republic had its warriors ready. This did leave Anakin and Obi-Wan on edge, but they made their decisions. They chose their path. And without anyone to politically challenge Satine on Mandalore, there was really nothing Dooku could do without straight up attacking the planet, which wasn't something Palpatine wanted to do. Sidious would rather politically secure the planet, because if he couldn't, then there was no need to try and take Mandalore, unless he wanted to obliterate the planet. That was a future plan, not something for the Clone Wars or anything to worry about right now. Anakin and his relationship with Bo would continue the way they had it. The chemistry allowed them to drag it along without calling it anything. It's not like they were interested in anyone else, but they just didn't want to slap a name on it for the sake of naming it. In a bond like this, there was no naming things, there was no rushing things, it just pursued naturally. Of course, that would be expected from a woman like Bo-Katan, not like she'd be a pushover. Plus, Bo was busy enjoying that Satine was finally married after all these years. But after having spent a year with Satine prior to Obi-Wan's return to Mandalore, she understood why Satine never married. Satine was only ever looking for Obi-Wan, and no one was him, so why waste her time with anyone else? She was glad she waited, and Obi-Wan was glad he waited too. Mandalore would continue to sign its allegiance to the Neutral Systems Coalition. From time to time, there would be attempts on Satine's life, but with a more rigid guard, 2 former Jedi and Bo-Katan, she was likely the safest politician in the galaxy. The Neutral Systems Coalition, which Mandalore led, was a crucial piece to the puzzle. Without Mandalore, the Neutral Systems would likely be shoved into opposing sides, which none of them really wanted. They wanted to remain neutral and keep the peace. It's not like Dooku and Palpatine didn't try, they gave attempts at it, which of course meetings with Satine, Obi-Wan, and Dooku weren't the most pleasant meetings in the galaxy. Regardless, Bo and Anakin took a short holiday to Kalevala after a mission took them and the Duchess to Coruscant. They went back to Castle Kryze, and it was there where the two of them made their bond an official title. Everyone saw it coming, it's not like Anakin was a good liar. Bo and him knew they were with each other, but after their holiday they just decided to give it an official title. Anakin became a part of the security force that Bo-Katan was in, and they both learned and taught each other new things. Their relationship was, well, really even. And while of course, like any relationship, there were disagreements, nothing ever got hostile. They spoke a language that only the other could speak, so what more could you ask for? Obi-Wan and Satine kept a close eye on all news regarding the Republic. Without a Death Watch around, Maul and Savage would have an encounter with Adi Gallia and Mace Windu, and while Adi Gallia would be killed by Savage, neither him or his brother were any match for the Jedi Master of the Order. He didn't give them a chance. They killed an entire village searching for Kenobi, believing that he was still a Jedi, and when their opponents showed up, they stood no chance. Mace first killed Savage and then gutted Maul next to his brother. It really was a series of unfortunate events for the two Zabrak brothers, but it played out as it should. Over the 3-year war that the Clone Wars was, nothing too jarring would happen. The Republic and the CIA CIS would have a long tug-of-war with each other, and it wouldn't really do much for them. With Palpatine and Dooku orchestrating the entire war effort, the war would just go as planned. That is, aside from a few inconveniences, though the largest one would come hours after the Battle of Coruscant when the Jedi took complete control over the Senate. Dooku wasn't killed or captured, and Palpatine was freed by the Jedi, but then put into capture by the Jedi. The public, and the Republic as a whole, wouldn't be pleased with the situation, but without Palpatine, Order 66 wouldn't be given, which allowed key Separatist planets to fall within days: Kata Nemodia, Felucia, Megiddo, Boz Pity, Kalar, and a number of others. This also meant that Kashyyyk would hold its own as well. On Utapau, Grievous and Dooku would be ambushed. The tragedy is, Dooku revealed to the Separatist Council that they'd been holding back their forces, but with Palpatine out of the picture, they could activate those forces. The idea would never leave the planet. Mace Windu, Saesee Tiin, Agnan Kolar, and Kit Fisto would descend onto the planet with a system fleet and catch the Seppies off guard. Kit Fisto would single-handedly defeat Grievous, as he had earlier in the war, this time killing him. Windu, Tiin, and Kolar would be able to defeat Dooku, though it would be through a lot of struggle. Dooku was very talented as a duelist, but so was Kolar, Tiin, and Windu. With no surprise attack on them, they could handle their own against the likes of Dooku. After he was captured, along with the rest of the Separatist Council, the war subsequently was forced into a resolution, which left the war coming to an end, aside from a few rebel cells. The Jedi, while regarded as criminals for their actions, would return the Republic to its politicians after restoring peace to the galaxy. While the end of the war was positive, the resolution was as far as Satine cared to look into it. She had to keep up with it for the sake of the Neutral Systems Coalition. The end of the war meant that Satine and Obi-Wan would be off-world a lot more. On another hand, they'd be hosting massive events inside of the Sundari Palace. These events were for bringing peace to the galaxy, and Mandalore was a neutral territory, hence hosting the peace talks, which would be dubbed the Sundari Accords. Because of how busy Duchess and Duke Consort were, Bo and Anakin were left to do what they wanted. 3 years of having an official relationship, and yet they felt no need to rush anything about it. Their romance had grown over the years, but it, like the first time, didn't need an additional title. If all they had was each other, then there was no need for anything else. That is, until they became the first in line to babysit the newest addition to the family. Satine and Obi-Wan had themselves a daughter in Astrid Kenobi Kryze, their heir to the throne. The eldest child, well, actually the only child. Turned out that despite his looks, quirky Kryze wasn't a Kenobi. Regardless, while Bo wasn't much of a softie, she absolutely fell in love with her niece. Satine and Obi-Wan were really good at splitting time up for everything regarding their daughter, but when they were required off-world, Bo and Anakin became babysitters. Anakin also loved Astrid. After all, not for nothing, whenever he married into the family, he and Obi-Wan would officially become legitimate brothers, in a way. Kinda cool if you think about it. After about a year, with the Republic restructuring with aid from the Neutral Systems Coalition, Bo would propose to Anakin. They agreed that they were cool with getting married, but Bo was competitive, and she wanted to be the first one to propose, which caught Anakin off guard. But Satine and Obi-Wan were in on the joke. Anakin, of course, was overjoyed and accepted it, though by the time they had their marriage, Asher was big enough to help out and be the flower girl. What a beautiful little wedding, with Bo and her prince consort and his best man Kenobi next to him, his new official brother, even though they were already brothers. Satine and Obi-Wan would call it quits with Astrid, both of them nearly in their 40s, so it'd probably be the best just to stick with one child. Plus, they could spoil her, like she wasn't already spoiled to begin with. Anakin and Bo would have themselves a kid a year and a half after their wedding, a boy named Wasu Skywalker Kryze. And while Bo didn't typically use the last name, the name did belong to her and her son. Wasu would be accompanied by a sister 2 years after, who'd be named bokatankryze. With Satine, Obi-Wan, Bo, and Anakin being so close, their children would grow up with each other, so for Astrid, especially, it never felt like she didn't have any siblings. The cool thing is, all 3 of these kids were Force sensitive, so they could be instructed on how to use the Force, but they would never be given up or away to the Jedi Order. The galaxy may have been changing around them, but Mandalore was grounded, and it became a home for peace in the wider galaxy. People saw the planet as a safe place, and the Mandalorian population began to increase, as the Republic fixed itself up. Satine continued her rule until the day she died. She and Obi-Wan would spend their lives together, as would Bo and Anakin. The Kryze family was big and happy. Shmi would have visits from her grandkids, but because they weren't extremely fond of the heat, Shmi and Klieg would be given a chance to start their lives on Mandalore, which they would take. Owen and Beru were given the same opportunity and would join Klieg and Shmi inside of their new residence, a modest upper-class residence with 4 bedrooms and several stories, and no moisture farming and no twin sons. Shmi loved having Anakin and his family nearby. It was the greatest life. It may have been a little rough to begin with, but they kept their heads up and made it through the darkest times together. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to Galvan Gaming, Tristan, Darth Revan, Pimp Daddy Bane, The Last Jedi, Apollo, The Eternal Padawan, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Madman Studios, Anakin003, Lemon Knight, Rex the Wolf, the man with 3 first names, Dark Same 46, Aaron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Smash the like button. If you want to support me in other ways, go check out the Patreon. Link is down below. Let's talk about our story. So there's an obvious main difference here. The one thing I had to address was the age difference. There's a big age difference. It's not the first time. I think Han and Leia are like 14 years apart. It's like 10 to 14 years apart in age, and so this is kind of similar to that. I don't think we have an official age for Bo. We don't have an official age for Satine, but she's around the same age as Obi-Wan. He's 35 at the end of the Clone Wars, so we could assume that like Bo is probably like 32, 31, 30. So it's a pretty big age gap between her and Anakin. If he's say by the end of the Clone Wars, if he's 22, she might be 31 or 32. Which means she looks great by the time the Mandalorian comes around, because she's like 60 something. But the main difference I wanted to cover here was the difference in the maturity in the relationship. Anakin and Padme are very forced, and I stick to the fact that they have a very, very, very toxic relationship. Showed throughout the Clone Wars, they almost got a divorce over an argument, and they're just not healthy. It's just like not a healthy relationship at all. I'm not crapping on it. It's literally intended to be that way. They're intended to be toxic because Anakin's meant to fall to the dark side, right? And so because Anakin isn't falling to the dark side in this particular story, there's room for something natural to happen here. And the reason nothing happens initially, and I want to focus on that, is that Anakin was too busy thinking about Padme, and in his mind, he didn't really see Bo-Katan as a love interest when they first started talking. It was only through natural development, through their chemistry, that he actually was like, oh, this person's pretty cool. I think this is a cool person. I might actually like this person. And that's like kind of the main difference, is like Anakin and Padme is like, didn't have any time to develop naturally. Like they got married within a week of seeing each other. Like that's insane to me. And so I wanted to make this flow a little bit more naturally, feel a little bit more quaint, and it had to have maturity. While both Bo and, at least I don't think Bo's been in a relationship, Bo and Anakin haven't been in relationships at this point in the story. Bo is an older woman, so she's going to be a little bit more mature, actually probably a lot more mature than Padme and Anakin combined, so that gives room for it to happen. And also, Bo-Katan's like a tough woman, so she's not going to be like super warmed up by anything Anakin tries to pull on her, and she'll probably reject it, which is also something Anakin probably would just like notice, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't try that with her. So anyways, hope you all enjoyed. Fun little romance stories. I love doing romance stories. It's just like change of pace, change of whatever's going on, just a little bit different, something else going on. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. Love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.